Welcome back. Aleppo was once Syria's largest city and the country's industrial and financial centre. But in 2012, it became, of course, a key battleground in the country's civil war, and the conflict has taken a huge toll on the city. Heavy bombardment, intense airstrikes have particularly laid waste to its old city, with many historic buildings and UNESCO-listed sites destroyed. Beit Ghazaleh is just one example of Aleppo's great historic houses located in the Christian quarter and built during the Ottoman times. This once magnificent building today lies in ruins. Well, with me now is Bruno Deslandes, a French architect who's been to Aleppo to assess the damage to Beit Ghazaleh. Also with us, Mark Ghazaleh, and I think that's a clue about Mark's link to the house, because your family used to own it. I mean, it must be heartbreaking to see the damage done to it. I mean, of course, not in when you're thinking about all the human lives lost as well, Mark. But tell us a little bit about this house, because it had been restored, hadn't it? Just in the run-up to the war.
It's sort of ironic. I followed a route back to what is an ancestral home, and the doors opened, and I was quite amazed by finding this house with the family name on it and reconnecting with other parts of the family that our side of the family hadn't been in touch with. So it had been restored, and it was intended to become the Museum of Aleppine Memories, setting in place the renovation in the old city. So in that sense, people would reconnect with their heritage.
We were originally describing it as a palace. I mean, it looks pretty big, but you're saying it's a house.
Well, it's known as Beit
Ghazaleh,
and this footage here is of when we were there in 2010, in the final stages of its restoration. And here the panels are being, some panels are being replaced, and the craftsmen were working on decorative panels and things like that. The masonry was finished, and it was quite extraordinary to walk in on this.
A moment of great pride for you. Bruno, did you see the house, the palace, then, or have you only seen it subsequently?
Unfortunately, I had no chance to see it before the war. We have been appointed by UNESCO in September in order to carry out a very detailed, high-resolution documentation and the diagnostic of the building, which has been significantly damaged during the armed conflicts.
So were you doing that post-destruction, or have you had access to other film? Because as we've seen with so much of Islamic State and Daesh with other national monuments and things, if it's been filmed carefully beforehand, you can work from that as a template. Is that what you were doing here?
In fact, it is much more complicated. Of course, we've got some documents from realized before the war, but what we have undertaken is much more accurate. This means that we have got 1.2 billion measurements of the building by using terrestrial 3D scanners from ground, 280 positions, so from the roof, inside, outside.
I think we got some, actually, Bruno, just hold on a minute, so I think we got some images of that, which were, well, here we go. So this is these are the 3D images now. So is that like CAD with a,
No, in fact...
No, completely, this is state-of-the-art. This is completely different
CAD
realm.
is what architects use for...
Yes, what you can see is just 5% from the data we have collected on site, and this is a fly through the measurements point clouds.
Okay.
So each point you can see is a measurement in space.
So that is technically accurate to the to millimeters.
And it helps...
0.2 of a millimeter.
Yeah, yes.
We're racing ahead a bit, actually, Mark. Let's just hear what happened to this house, though, and how quickly in the early stages of the war, or later on.
We were looking to capture all the research on the house as the family to join up with the renovation process, and we were in the final stages of waiting for the restoration to be done, and then to take final photographs. The permission never came, as everything started to get stuck in 2011, and then by August 2012 it was impossible, and Al-Jdeida became a zone of direct conflict, a front line, and the house, more or less, within 50 meters, 75 meters on either side, was in the front line, with the front lines moving back and forth. So it suffered from considerable collateral damage, and at some point, it's totally inexplicable, all of the let's say the panels from the 1690, the decorative panels, disappeared. but this was in a conflict zone, and we don't understand whether they were taken out for safekeeping.
Your suspicion would be what? That they've been taken by looters to sell on, or do you think could they have been taken to be preserved in safekeeping?
Definitely not to be preserved. Looters.
By looters, yes.
Access to the site, yes.
Okay, and those might now be on the international markets, propping up some.
They could be in
some French chateau in
any property, but it's so these are some of the panels there, and they could be anywhere. This is one of the horrors. Is you actually on some of the footage that we got afterwards, you could actually see how the panels had been ripped out.
Is it for both of you? I mean, you've been commissioned by UNESCO. I don't think this house was actually in the UNESCO site, was it? I mean, wasn't it just outside originally?
It was outside the UNESCO area.
But just in terms of getting society back together again when this conflict eventually ends, how important is it, Bruno, do you think, to restore, to renovate buildings like this, to bring back the soul of a country after the trauma of war, and especially civil war?
I just would like to highlight that, in fact, we are not speaking yet about reconstruction. We are still in war context. So, for the moment, the work we have done is used by the local authorities, by the Department for Antiquities, to document the site, design some emergency shoring structures, and start to clean the site, so we are sure there's no bomb anymore, because when we have worked there, you still have arms and explosives on site.
I was astonished, because Bruno told me that, we had been trying to get back into the site and couldn't understand why we were not being able to document what had happened. Then Bruno finally went in, and I was told that Bruno had gone in where someone had actually not only surveyed it, but actually got this amount of data out. But it is so dangerous. Some of the footage that we have shows unexploded ordnance. In fact, Bruno tells me that there was actually a mortar factory in the basement when the house was held by the... So the collateral damage is quite...
Okay. I wish we had more time, but we don't. But good luck with all...
Thank you very much.
Mark and Bruno, thank you very much indeed. You're watching Global. Still to come, we'll get the latest on our top story, the explosion in New York.